Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm your host, Adam Ganucheau. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story. I'm your host, Adam Ganucheau. Joining me today in the studio are my colleagues Bobby Harrison. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, Adam. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm making it. I'm doing okay.
Good to see you here.
I know it. And across from me at the table here is Taylor Vance. Hey, Taylor.
Hey, Adam.
It's good to be with y'all. I don't know, it feels like the last few months I haven't been in the studio as much as I used to be, and have appreciated y'all holding it down for me, but thanks for letting me back in the door.
We've been trying.
We do what we can to make it in your absence.
That's right. Our esteemed colleague Jeff Pender, for anybody who's missing the dulcet tones of his voice today, he is in the deer stand. So, or prepping the deer stand. I'm not sure. Is it deer season yet? I think he can be in there this morning. I think that's right. Yeah.
I just hope he doesn't fall out.
Yeah, that's right.
Hopefully, by the time everyone hears this, Jeff will have killed a nice buck.
That's right. Well, he's always angling for it seems like, and we joke about sort of every holiday season. It seems like when we're recording podcasts, our weekly podcasts, of course, he at least records one per year from either a hunting blind or a deer stand. So we'll have to get him on hopefully sometime later this holiday season.
Hopefully, because if he kills a nice 10-point, usually that means we get some nice deer sausage,
right.
or some good meat to make some deer burgers or something.
Something like that. Yeah, he's good about sharing the wealth there. So, well, Bobby and Taylor, we are obviously mid-November. There's a lot just going on across the country, politically speaking. We're watching the news roll in every day. It seems like every hour of every day with the national presidential transition. President-elect Trump is appointing his cabinet and other sort of high-profile posts in the federal government. Every day it seems there's a new name coming through. We're watching some scandal. It seems like maybe potential scandal brew in Congress over some of those confirmations in the Senate in particular. Of course, Republicans have a 54-seat majority in the Senate. I think that's right. If I'm wrong, somebody will email me. But
53 or 54.
53 or 54. So but there are some moderate Senate Republicans who are sort of going to be interesting to watch in terms of who gets appointed and who gets confirmed and who might not get confirmed. There are some interesting Mississippi angles to that. Our colleague Jeff Pender wrote a good column about that last week. If you haven't read that, please check it out. I told Jeff, I promised him that I would mention that on this episode. A couple names from Mississippi in particular, which could trigger a domino effect of sorts in terms of replacing potential Trump appointees to Washington. So we're obviously closely on the lookout for all that. But more than anything here locally, here in Mississippi, we are very closely covering and watching two judicial runoffs that will occur on Tuesday, November 26th. The first one I'll mention is Court of Appeals, so it's the second highest court in Mississippi. We've got two candidates out of three down there. It's the South Mississippi kind of Gulf Coast district seat for the Court of Appeals. Two candidates, Amy St. Pei and Jenifer Schloegel. They both faced off on November 5th against Ian Baker. Guys, you don't see very many sort of three-way races that are as close as that one was. That didn't get called for, a couple days or so after the election because it was so close. All three of those candidates on the 5th, they were right at around 33%, really running neck and neck all night.
It came down to the absentees and affidavits.
That's right, yeah. So, like I said, the two that did advance to the November 26th runoff, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I think we'll talk about that for a minute, too, in a second, but is Jenifer Schloegel and Amy St. Pei. So two well-known names down there on the Gulf Coast, Schloegel and St. Pei, both of them are sort of, notorious political families down there, and that should be an interesting race to watch for sure. But the one I want to dwell on, the race that we are watching here in Central Mississippi, I think it's a little bit more compelling for multiple reasons. I think that we'll get into that in just a second. But the Central District State Supreme Court race, we've got longtime incumbent Supreme Court Justice Jim Kitchens, who, if you listen to this podcast, he joined y'all just last week on last week's episode to talk about his race and the runoff and all that. He will face on November 26th, again, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, he will face Republican State Senator Jenifer Branning. She's from Philadelphia, Mississippi. I will mention right here and now that we have invited Senator Branning to join the podcast. By the way, it's all worked out, though. I don't know that she's going to get on before that runoff, but we made every effort and then some to try to get her on this week, and just didn't work out, sadly. But we just wanted to mention we did invite them.
Yeah, we invited her the same day we invited Justice Kitchen. So it's not like we invited her late.
I think what happened was we reached out to both campaigns on the same day and said, we want y'all to come on to the podcast. We have a slot. We had the slot to record last weekend, and then we have this slot this week, and Justice Kitchens' campaign responded first, and so we booked him first, and then we followed back up with Senator Branning's campaign, and they just said they didn't think they could make it work logistically. So,
well, I mentioned.
So you get us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're stuck with us this week, but that's okay, because I think that there's a lot to talk about here, and this is a race that I think for many Mississippians in this central district. This is a swath of counties from up in the Delta through Jackson, through central Mississippi, over to East Mississippi. So it's not the whole state that will be voting in this runoff, nor the Court of Appeals one we just mentioned. That's just South Mississippi. But even in this district, which this race has gotten a good bit of coverage, and there has been a good bit of money from both of these campaigns spent on advertising, it still feels like one of the more under-the-radar races I can remember in recent memory that had so much importance. I said a second ago, this is compelling. I would back that up by saying that Justice Kitchens is how I see it, how many people see it, and y'all may disagree, is Justice Kitchens is one of the two true liberals on the 9-member Supreme Court. And more than that, he's number 2 in line, sort of in seniority, which is important for Chief Justice ranking. So right now, Mike Randolph, the longest serving justice on the court, he is Chief Justice, but Justice Kitchens is right behind him. So if Justice Randolph were to retire, resign, or decide not to run again or something like that, Justice Kitchens would become Chief Justice, which comes with some power. So, just talking about the politics, though, and Bobby, I can see you're chomping at the bit here, but I view Justice Kitchens as one of the 2 reliable liberals on the court, the 9-person court, and State Senator Jenifer Branning, his challenger in this runoff, would become, in my mind, the single most conservative member of the Supreme Court, and that's saying a lot given the makeup of the rest of the court.
Yeah, I would push back just a tiny bit. I would say maybe that Justice Kitchens is I don't know if you'd on a national scale, I don't think he'd be considered a liberal, but he is not as conservative as as probably 7 of the 9 justices. I think is the way I would agree with that.
I would definitely say he's more of a centrist. Left of center, I don't know if I would say he would be a true liberal. Certainly not in terms of a national.
Putting it on the Mississippi scale, though, he is certainly among the 2 who are farthest left on any political spectrum you could put on that court, at least.
That's correct.
But that sort of brings up a quote from former State Representative Steve Holland, who was sort of famous for saying anything to the left of Attila the Hun in Mississippi is considered liberal. So sure.
You said that, Taylor. Yeah. But you were quoting Holland.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think
he's a different voice than
100%. Yeah. I mean, when any sort of major sort of social issue in particular comes before that court, you can count on him to be sort of considered in opposition to the Republican establishment. I'm not talking politics, just Republican Democrat on the court, of course. These are nonpartisan races. have been forever. And we're not talking about just strictly Republican Democrat here. We're talking about just general leanings and political philosophies, and that comes into play on any high court, and certainly here in Mississippi.
And not to take sides in the race, but I do think it's important to have a court where there's different voices that might temper any decision. I think there's a possibility. I think that all the justices appear. Which hadn't always been the case, but it appears all the justices get along. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors in the Garten building, but they appear to get along. And I do think that that Justice Kitchens and the other justice who's not as conservative, Justice King, I do think they listen to them and take their views into account as they write their opinions.
That's right. Balance on any high court like that is sort of how it was intended to be. And we're talking about, we've got a 9-person Supreme Court right now. We're talking about 2 earnestly looking at this, 2 justices in Justice Kitchens and Justice King. You just mentioned, Bobby, who would sort of provide some of the moderation to the other 7 justices who would be inclined, based on rulings and their own sort of backgrounds, to lean right on that political spectrum, at least lean right, if not sort of solidly be planted right. And like I said, I don't know that this is up for debate, and maybe y'all can push back, but I believe that Jenifer Branning would become the single most sort of conservative justice on that court if she were to win.
That's kind of how she's running. Totally. She's running as she touts her conservative credentials, and she has a lot of them to talk about. When you're in the legislature, you take a lot of votes, and there's a lot of votes that she can point to for her conservative credentials. And I questioned before the election whether that was a smart move in the sense.
Let's talk about that district.
The 9 justices are elected from 3 districts, and the Central District has traditionally been the Democratic district. So when Jenifer Branning was running, saying that she was constitutional conservative, that she was endorsed by the Republican Party, which they run nonpartisan, but the party has a First Amendment right to make endorsements, and she was running as the Republican, endorsed by the state Republican Party.
Just to underscore this point right here, she is running ads across the district on TV and on social media in which she is herself saying very directly, "I am the only candidate in this race endorsed by the Mississippi Republican Party."
Yeah.
She's gotten the endorsements of Governor Tate Reeves on down to major, Republican leaders in the state too.
Now, and I was thinking, is that the right move in this district?
Yeah.
In 2020, I went back and it was hard for me to do because math's not my strong suit. Fortunately, I had help from my wife, but Joe Biden won this district against Donald Trump by almost 30,000 votes.
Wow!
And I went back and did the same math in the Harris
for this year
Trump race this year.
5th.
And actually, Trump. Now, these are not official results, and I think this may change a little bit when the official results are in. But Trump won the district early on in the first,
on election
night when they say all the votes in, but really all the votes aren't in. But he won it by about 2,000 votes. Now, what happened is, based on those early votes, the turnout's going to be a lot less, Taylor, than it was
4 years ago
in 2020, which is surprising. I thought Harris would actually generate more support in the district than Biden, and maybe when all the votes, when the official results are supposed to come in and be reported to the Secretary of State's office, soon, and when you get the late arriving mail-in votes and affidavit votes, that number jumps up a lot. But so Harris still may win the district, but I think it's going to be fair to say, Taylor, that the turnout's not going to be what it was in 2020.
Yeah, and this is sort of a separate discussion, but I do think I've seen some data that shows Mississippi may have this election cycle may have had the lowest voter turnout rate out of any state in the nation, which is not all that surprising.
Yeah, I think it was a lot more in 2020. Apparently, it was still one of the lowest in 2020. So we just don't
We did. In 2020, just as a reminder, we did have a U.S. Senate race, which was like a close one. You had Mike Espy, a Democrat, running against then, I guess, incumbent U.S. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. That was a very contentious race for multiple reasons, and I think that there was millions and millions and millions of dollars poured into the state just in advertising on that race alone. So,
and the pandemic just kind of made everything different.
But in the Central District Supreme Court district, Bobby, you're saying that this time it looks like, at least preliminarily, that Trump won the district,
right? And based on how Jenifer Branning is running, it doesn't. It's not always 1-to-1, but you assume most of the Trump voters are going to be Jenifer Branning voters.
You have to assume that.
The Kitchens. There was 3 other people in the race.
5 total on November 5th.
So I think some of the Trump voters might have voted for some of those other voters. So what Kitchen's job is before what needs to do before the runoff is to get the word out that if you voted for Vice President Harris, he may be your candidate.
Yeah. So 5 total candidates on November 5th in this race. Branning actually led the pack, which if you look at it isn't surprising. It's probably expected with 42% of the vote. Kitchens was second place, obviously, with 36% of the vote. And then Ciola James, 10%, Byron Carter, 7%, Abby Robinson, 5%. So, if Kitchens were to – this is not how runoffs work, especially in races that are not very on people's radars. But, if Kitchens were to get all the votes of those other 3, and I think we would consider all 3 of those other candidates left-leaning or Democratic candidates, he would win. He would win easily. But it's just an interesting kind of question, like who's going to turn out? Yeah. Who's going to turn out the Tuesday before Thanksgiving – after the big show, the presidential race is over on both sides? Like, if you're a Democrat in the Central District and you just got smoked electorally, your presidential candidate got beat, you might not be feeling too good about things. On the flip side, if you're a Republican voter in the Central District, your guy just won, you just took care of business across the board. Are you kind of just like, hey, it's Thanksgiving week, I'm gonna stay with family or whatever? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's Thanksgiving week, and as you said, a very important race, but a very low profile race. Uh-huh. It's not on many people's radar, so it's going to be, the turnout's going to be so key. And I think and Taylor, when Justice Kitchen was on the podcast with us, I think he's been reluctant to talk about Senator Branning, but he did talk some about her experience. And he talked about what he perceived was her lack of courtroom experience. And I was hoping she'd come on the podcast to talk about that herself and defend it. And he hasn't really talked about it, but she had some votes that I don't think would, as a senator, I don't think would actually play well in the Central District. She voted against changing the state flag. She voted against Medicaid expansion, and perhaps some other votes too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the issues that would directly sort of correlate to her campaign for Supreme Court justice is some of the votes that she's taken on criminal justice issues. She has, I think, voted in favor of increasing mandatory minimum sentences, increasing those for some crimes. And, I mean, to be clear, I don't think that her vote was necessarily an outlier in the Republican-controlled Senate, but I certainly do think that those would be great questions to direct toward her, because the Supreme Court does deal with a lot of criminal appeals. That makes up the bulk of, I think, of what they consider on appeal. But I agree. I've been a little confused, or I've questioned a little bit why, just from a pure political standpoint, not favoring one candidate over the other, but I mean, why? I mean, there's a clear record that the Kitchens campaign has at their disposal, and it seems like they haven't really just gone very hard in criticizing that record. I mean, just likewise, I mean, you see what Senator Branning appears to be successfully doing with Justice Kitchens is trying to label him as a liberal that's sort of out of touch with Mississippi. I mean, I think they've had a lot of success doing that. Now we can debate over whether that's accurate. We can have a debate over whether she should be doing that. But I mean, it appears to that she's been doing it quite successfully.
That and I think his age has been an issue to a certain extent. And I think he's roughly the same age as our current president and our president-elect, and he appears to be. I mean, he talked about his mom being a piano teacher till she was 90
late 90s.
Years old.
Yeah. I'm from Copiah County, which is where Justice Kitchens and his family are from too, and she was like kind of a legend in Copiah County. Like everybody knew her as the strict piano teacher, a good one, but a strict one who. I mean, she was doing it until she was real old. So yeah, I think I don't know something. I've been covering Jenifer Branning since she was elected to the state senate. I mean, I've closely covered a lot of debates that she had a direct hand in, and some others that certainly she took some interesting votes that were not easy or not hard to sort of flag. But one that I've been thinking a lot about is she voted against equal pay. I mean,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
That's one of those things. There are not very many women in the Mississippi legislature, period. So you remember when a woman in the legislature votes against something like equal pay. To me, given how obvious it was how the economy drove voters across the country on November 5th, that's another thing. We're talking about just kind of like what's missing from any kind of typical political campaign. The knocks on the opposing candidate. If I were Kitchens, I'd be thinking about something like that too. But say what you want about Kitchens. Y'all can listen to last week's podcast. If you question his age, listen to it for yourself. I thought he handled himself with y'all two guys really, really well. And he's a kind man. That's kind of like what he's known for. He's always run campaigns that he says publicly he wants to keep them positive, and he does not like having to go negative at all, and rarely has, if ever, himself. So it's just his style. It's always been his style. I think that's something that we know political operatives on both sides of the aisle here. We're talking to people who have worked or helped on both campaigns. I think I've not heard a single person who can say with certainty how to forecast this runoff, because it's weird. It's just a really weird one.
There's a long history in Mississippi of unpredictable runoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one, and look, we'll see. I think I'm seeing the ads still on TV. I'm getting them when I'm scrolling social media. I think that it's going to be a really interesting few days here to see kind of how this plays out, how this turns out, and we'll of course keep closely watching and covering it. So,
I think I would just say one final thing for our listeners who may be wondering, why is this so crucial? And I would just remind people that, especially in today's political climate in Mississippi, with how our legislature and the governor works, the state Supreme Court has really sort of had the final say in a lot of legislation that has passed. I would point to the ballot initiative that the Supreme Court decided to invalidate. We have House Bill 1020, which is the legislation that the legislature passed and that the governor signed to sort of expand I believe they expanded the CCID district and created a sort of a new court system in Jackson. We have the recent decision over the legislature spending tax dollars to go toward private schools. There are multiple Supreme Court decisions that impact the lives of Mississippians, and how that court votes impacts public policy. And again, they have started to have the final sort of stamp of approval on more and more legislation. So I would just sort of end with that their decisions do impact people's lives around the state.
Yeah, before you end, I think Justice Kitchens was in the minority opinion on the ballot initiative and the public school spending. They didn't rule on actually whether public school, public money going to private schools was constitutional. They just said that the case wasn't right to consider that particular issue.
Didn't have standing.
I think Justice Kitchens said he wrote agreed to a dissenting opinion that said that this was unconstitutional and that the party that did file a lawsuit had standing. Taylor, before let me ask you this. During this past legislative session, they passed a bill to change the runoff in the statewide races. If there was a runoff needed from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, I guess there's no talk of doing that in judicial races. I think the turnout might be better after Thanksgiving instead of the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
I'm not sure. I don't remember any talk of that. But I don't know how that legislation impacted the Supreme Court race. I mean, I guess it didn't. So maybe that's something that they should consider next legislative session.
Yeah, my final thought or takeaway, and it's just kind of a factoid. I don't know how to forecast whether this is even a factor. I would say it probably isn't much of a factor at the top of minds of voters right now. But if Justice Kitchens, again, it's a favorable district historically to a candidate like Kitchens, if he were to win this runoff, there would not be a woman on the Supreme Court. We had Justice Dawn Beam. She got defeated by
David Sullivan.
Yeah, David Sullivan. I was blanking on his name. A man on the Southern District Court this November 5th. She just got outright beat pretty handily by Sullivan. So she would no longer be on the court, of course. So if Kitchens wins,
which is sort of
all-male Supreme Court.
Yeah, which is sort of ironic because at the same time that is happening, it is now all but certain that about half of the members of the Court of Appeals would be women, and I believe I was asking some people. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It would be the most number of women to have ever served as judges on the Court of Appeals. And the reason that we know this is because the two candidates in that Southern District runoff are both women, and so of course the winner would be the next judge on that court, and so they would be the fifth woman to serve as a judge.
Lucky for you, I don't have the institutional knowledge to fact check you in real time on that, but I'd take your word for it.
Yeah, I think that's got to be right.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's just a factoid I just wanted to throw out there. Anyways, well, Bobby and Taylor, appreciate, as always, y'all being here to help us understand all this, break it down for us. November 26th is the runoff for both that Central District Supreme Court race and the Southern District Court of Appeals race. So it's not Southern District; it's a number. I can't remember what number it is. But
Central District.
Central on the Supreme Court, but somewhere in South Mississippi on the Court of Appeals. So, anyways, thank y'all again, and we'll keep covering it. Check out MississippiToday.org for all the latest. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app or stream episodes online at MississippiToday.org/The Other Side. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganucheau. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.